Hello, Oberlin. I love a small town. Someone just called John Gates for me. I thought I had a number that worked for him, and I had his home number, but I'm sure, like everybody else, he's got his cell phone, and I don't have his cell. But John is on his way. Thank you to the powers that be in Oberlin. I had just teed up T-Bone Walker, call it Stormy Monday. You could call it Stormy Saturday. I haven't yet gone back and listened to any of the shows that I've recorded. I'm not sure I'll go back and listen to this one either. But we've got John Gates on his way. That's fantastic. So, what would we ask Mr. Gates about? He was my second grade teacher. He was my fifth grade teacher. I went on a youth trip to South Dakota with him. I believe that was my sophomore summer in high school. Went to school with his kids, went to college with one of them. That was out at that Grinnell College place there in Iowa. So what would we ask him? We might ask him about teaching. 35 years ago, there was no Common Core. We talked about Common Core a few weeks ago with Superintendent John Schroth. That was a good time. That was educational. And maybe we'll talk to him about what changes he went through in teaching. And we know that he's active with the local farmers market. We know that he is, well, I don't know if you know, but he travels to Central America. I'm aware of that. He's a member of First Church. Those are all good things to ask questions about. He'll get here. He's coming, and it's only 5:30. I've played both my PSAs, so I don't have to play another one. All I've got to do is identify the station every so often. You know who I am, maybe, Peter Cummings. This is Oberlin, the radio show that I do to find out what's going on in Oberlin. I do that by talking to people who live here, who work here, who've been here their whole lives, possibly. And, the doorbell is ringing. This is a little bit exciting. Please hold while I go identify the guest. You're okay. And you are now live on air. Hi, John.
Live on air. Hi, Pete. How you doing?
I'm fine, thanks. Thanks for
what a beautiful day out there.
Thanks for beating the retreat down here. You know, probably 2.5 hours ago, I saw you. You happen to live right across the street from me, so I saw you walking out and heading east there on College, and I thought, oh, he's getting a walk-in before the show.
Yeah, that's what I was doing to wake up.
Okay, all right. Well, real good. Thanks for coming down.
Oh, my pleasure.
And the whole next half hour is yours.
Oh, wow. I hope you have some questions to direct.
I do, in fact, I do. I was first going to say that, and I've already told the listeners, however many stick with me, that you were my second grade teacher, my fifth grade teacher, and I don't believe I ever had you as a principal, but you were a principal here in the school district.
Yeah, I was a principal at Prospect for 3 years.
Okay. So can you share how you got into teaching, and if it wasn't in Oberlin that you first got your start, how did you arrive in Oberlin to do your teaching?
Okay, I can, yeah, absolutely. I graduated from Kent State University in 1969, and about that time there was this fantastic, really popular book by John Holt, an author, John Holt, and it was entitled How Children Fail. And he was talking about the public school system and things that people were doing wrong. Everybody, parents, teachers, administrators. And I read this book and I thought, and at that time I was a senior at Kent State, and I thought, man, here I am about to graduate, and I don't know what I want to do. And my major was political science, and I had a minor in French, and I thought, this is really going to be embarrassing if I graduate and don't have any plans for after graduation. But I really got interested in this public education in the United States. And I thought, yeah, this is something that I can really do. I like this, and I want to be an elementary teacher. And at that time, Oberlin had this fantastic program called the Master of Arts in Teaching program. And it was especially designed for undergraduate students that had not taken any education courses during their, or very few, not enough to have a certificate to teach. And so they had the guy that was directing it, Charles Rathbone, had specialized in the open school in Leicestershire, England. And I was interested in the open school concept, and so without any hesitation, I came to Oberlin, or I applied for the program and was accepted, and then came to Oberlin to be in that program. So that's how I got to Oberlin. I should tell you that my wife Linda really she had been in this Master of Arts teaching program before I was here. She did a Master of Arts in secondary school, and she said, "This is really a good program, and if you're thinking about going into public school teaching, you ought to consider this program." So, and I was, I've never been sorry that's how I got to Oberlin. It was a 2-year program here. I graduated and started teaching in Amherst in an open school, open classroom, and stayed there for 5 years. But I really wanted to come to Oberlin. Oberlin was to me a really one of the most interesting communities in this area. And so I applied 1 year to Oberlin.
What year would that have been?
It would have been 77. Yeah, 77, I think. And I was turned down. Actually, maybe I applied in 76 and was turned down, or I didn't get the job. So I came back the next year and applied and was hired. And I was hired as a second grade teacher at Eastwood. This was a split first-second. So half of your class was first graders, half of your class was second graders.
In the same classroom?
In the same classroom, yeah.
Oh.
And the idea was the second graders could be teachers to the first graders, and peer teaching, and that was a really popular concept at that time. So that's where I started out Eastwood, and I stayed in that situation 2 years, and then I thought, gee, I really would like to concentrate on just one grade. And so I moved to just a straight second grade, and I think that's when I met you. Yeah.
I'll take your word on that. I wouldn't have any knowledge of the other background there, but I do remember second grade very well. Yeah. And some of that shared teaching was still going on across the hall, as I recall. There was a first and a second grade combination.
Yeah, yes, that was right. Ray Levy and Gail Woods had a fantastic open room class that they operated over there for years and years and years, and then after they left and went elsewhere, it was continued to operate. So yeah, it was a really strong influence on Oberlin education. Right.
And from there, 3 years later, you're in fifth grade. Is that just advancing through the district?
No, I after 2 years teaching second graders, I really wanted to teach an older child. I wanted to study social studies, and that was one of my strengths, history. And I thought, I need to work with an older student, and I can share some of my knowledge with older students. And so there was an opening at fifth grade, and I applied for that and got it, and moved over to Prospect and stayed there for 8 years.
Now, all told, how long were you with the district?
15 years.
15 years.
Yeah.
Okay. So you would have retired from not teaching, you would have been retiring from being the principal.
Right.
And what year would that have been?
That was 1990. Spring of 1990. Yes.
Okay, so you're 14 years with this school district, and why retire then? What did you want to go and do?
Well, I didn't retire. I thought, gee, I've been here, let me see, at that point, 15 years. I thought I really need to go to another district and see how they organize their teachers, the curriculum, and I really wanted to go to somewhere else, and so I resigned and started applying for jobs all over the state and had some really great interviews, but it took me a long time to land a job, and finally I got one in the western part of Ohio, out near Lima, Ohio. And it was an elementary school, kindergarten through 6th grade, and we had about 1,200 students. And there was a principal and an assistant principal. Huge school. And I became the assistant principal there and stayed there for 4 years.
Okay. Commuting the whole time?
What I did was a weekend commute. I got a little apartment out there, very small, and so I went out there on Sunday evening and came home on Friday and stayed here, Friday night, Saturday night, and then Sunday afternoon I headed back.
Well, and you kept that up for 4 years?
4 years, yeah.
A lot of miles on a car at that point.
A lot of miles on the car, and I had this fantastic old Chevy Suburban.
Oh, yeah.
Really, it was great for driving long distances.
I may even remember that Suburban. There are certain people's cars that stick with you, or stick with me anyway. That is one of them. Of course, all the station wagons that my folks ever had are more of those. But yeah, the Suburban. Now you have 2 children, Chris and Alice.
And Alice,
and
yes.
they both came up through the Oberlin school.
Yep.
Did you have either or both of them as a student ever?
I never had Alice. I had Christopher in a reading class when he was in 5th grade, and I had also had Christopher when I was at Eastwood in some classes. Arts and crafts classes. There were 7 teachers, 7 classrooms, and we would divide up the students, and each of us would take some topic, and so a couple times, Chris was in another class, Mrs. Broadwell, Jean Broadwell's class, but several occasions he ended up in we called them interest centers, and he ended up in my interest center, so we had a good time with that.
Do you ever get into the schools anymore these days? I had John Schroth on a few weeks ago, and one of the topics was the Common Core curriculum that is being instituted everywhere. Right. And I just wonder if having the benefit of perspective going back to the mid-'70s, how you see curriculum changing, or if you're able to see enough of it these days to even have a comparison.
Actually, I don't get into the schools that much. Occasionally, I will go to Prospect, actually, and I will talk about Guatemala, because that's one of my interests since retiring from education. It's been working in Guatemala. And interestingly enough, it's in an educational scene where I'm with a group here in Oberlin called SEPA, and we're working to improve education in rural Guatemalan communities. And so, I go to Prospect and show some slides and tell them about Guatemala and how it's different from the United States, and also before this, I got into Eastwood a good bit. Actually, I was when the SITES program was first getting started, SITES, Spanish in the elementary schools.
We like their parade float every year.
Oh, yeah, right. That's right. And that's coming up, too. Yeah, May 3rd, I think.
Okay, yeah.
Anyway, so Kim Faber, professor here in the Hispanic department at Oberlin College, invited me to be one of the SITES teachers in kindergarten, and that was a fantastic program. So,
well, I mentioned the Guatemala trips that you make because I'm aware that you make those trips, but I have no depth of knowledge about why or how long. Yeah. What are those trips for you? How did you become involved in those?
Yeah. I don't know if you remember or not, but in the mid-'80s, there was a really strong program here called the Oberlin Overground Railroad.
I do.
You do. You remember that.
Yeah.
Well, this was an organization that helped refugees from El Salvador and Guatemala.
Right. Do I remember them being at First Church at different times?
That First Church was a very important part of the Overground Railroad, along with Peace Community Church, the Episcopal Church. Did quite a bit. Let's see. Oh, and Peace Mennonite Church out in Elyria really worked with us a lot on various projects. But our purpose was to provide a safe haven for those people who had escaped from the civil wars in El Salvador and Guatemala, and provide work, a place to live, an orientation towards a North American culture, and in 6 months, they could get like a visa to, I don't think it was actually a visa, but like a landed immigrant status to Canada. And they could go on to Canada and settle as potential Canadian citizens. And the problem was that in the United States at that time, the government was very pro the El Salvadoran government and the Guatemalan government, and they were giving all kinds of support to those governments who were really committing untold acts of human rights abuses and genocide. And so the United States government would not give these people from El Salvador and Guatemala refugee status in the United States. So this was a great alternative to hiding out in the United States or being illegal. They could move on to Canada and become legal citizens eventually.
Well, Oberlin has a history of being a place for that kind of stopping point.
That's right.
Right.
And I think we played on the the overground,
Obviously,
the
yeah,
underground railroad,
right.
and this was the overground railroad because we were out in the open.
And say again, what got you interested in that?
Well, actually, at First Church there was a discernment process. This was in the mid-'80s. I can't remember, 84, 83, something like that. And so we were thinking about becoming a sanctuary church in Oberlin. And a sanctuary church is where you welcome refugees into the church, and there's a law in, well, actually it's a biblical law that the civil law cannot come into a church and arrest people. The church can provide protection. Mm-hmm. And so the idea is that while you're hosting refugees from, in this case, Central America, then you publicize why they left and what happened to individual members of their family or mm-hmm. whatever, and try to change the minds of the people who are imposing these very wrong policies in Central America. So we invited people in, both immigrants from El Salvador, and we invited people who had been doing sanctuary church, and we went to several meetings, and then we brought it before the congregation. I say we, I didn't, but John Elder was really instrumental in this, and Ann Elder. And anyway, John was the pastor there at that time, and he brought it before the congregation, and we discussed it, and the idea was to take a vote on it, but it was clear from our discussion that it would have been too divisive, so we didn't do that. Mm-hmm. And instead, John found this other program that was based in Evanston, Illinois, called the Overground Railroad.
Right.
And it was organized by a group of Mennonites in Evanston, Illinois, and so we went that way. Mm-hmm. And so that's how I got into it, and we formed an organization called ORC, Oberlin Overground Railroad Coalition.
Sure.
And I became the chair of that group, and so that really became involved in it then.
And how does that translate to you going to Guatemala now?
Okay, glad you asked. Well, at that time, our daughter Alice was about 8 years old, and So once we had our committee, our group formed, we accepted a family from El Salvador to come to Oberlin. And there was a mother and a grandmother and 3 children ages 4, 5, and 6. And the father had been murdered because he was trying to organize a teachers union in El Salvador. And then they had fled, and they had crossed the Rio Grande, and they had walked all the way through Mexico, then crossed the Rio Grande, and then they were put in a detention cell. But with the help of the Mennonite group interviewed them, bailed them out of detention, and then took them to a place in Georgia. It's called Comer, Georgia, and there's an intentional community there called Jubilee Partners, which at that time was just working with refugees, and they still exist. And by the way, Jubilee Partners is an offshoot of Koinonia, which is another intentional community in South Georgia.
Real quick, intentional community, what do you mean?
It's a community that comes together for a particular purpose, and usually they share the wealth of the whole community. It's like you don't have personal wealth, and
right.
If you have a car,
anybody can use it.
Right. And so it's so this family, and they Jubilee Partners was probably taking care of 30 families at a time, but this particular family, they was assigned to Oberlin, and in fact, the mother and the 3 children lived at our house. The grandmother lived next door with Barbara Susi, who used to be a neighbor of mine, and so our daughter was 8 years old, and we set our 2 children down, Alice and Chris, and we said, okay, here's what we're going to do for a while, and this is what our church is doing, and this is a role that we have assumed in this adventure.
Right. Yeah.
And so Alice was really excited. Oh wow, 3 little kids, 4, 5, and 6. This will be fantastic. And Chris, on the other hand, was saying, wow, this means that I won't see you more. Not only are you doing other things, but this means I will see you less. And but he came around, and so what I'm saying is that Alice, the family lived with us for 6 months before they got their papers to move to Canada, and Alice really, I think, developed an empathy towards this family, and when she graduated from college, she said, I want to go to Guatemala and be a human rights monitor. And I think so maybe she got the first idea by living in a family with some refugees from El Salvador. And she goes off, she gets training, she goes off to Guatemala, and she lives in Santa Elena, 20 de Octubre, for 6 months. And while she's there, she's there over Christmas, and she invites Linda and me down to see the community and see what she's doing. Right. And so we go, and Linda and I fell in love with this place, and it was interesting because at the same time that this was happening, that Alice was going to Guatemala, there was a couple that had been working in human rights in Guatemala. Melanie, what was Melanie's? Jonathan Moeller and his wife Melanie. And I can't remember Melanie's name that she went by. But anyway, they were a fantastic couple, and they organized this group that would work about Guatemalan issues, political issues, refugee issues, human rights issues. And so they really formed this group that's called SEPA, SEPA, Santa Elena Project of Accompaniment. And this group is still going on. This is like 17 years later, and this group is still working. So this is sort of how I got into Guatemala. Was was directly through our daughter Alice's work there.
And when you go down there, how often first do you go down, and what do you do?
I go down twice a year, once in August and once in January. And the trip in August is sort of, it's to prepare for the trip in January. And I mean, prepare, I say, okay, in January, SEPA's going to bring a group down here mainly of Oberlin College students, and about 10 Oberlin College students, and we want to take some Spanish lessons, and so you have to organize some Spanish classes, and there'll be people that are fluent in Spanish, so they may not want to study Spanish, but can you teach them the Mayan language that they use? That's their first language. It's called Quechua, and then we want to learn how to make tortillas from the time you pick the corn off the stalk and take the grains off the cob, and everything about that. I want the students to
real
go through
immersive learning there.
What?
Real immersive learning.
Real immersive learning, yes, and first-hand experience. And then we want to make chocolate too, the same way. We want to pick cacao from cacao trees and take out the seeds or beans, dry them, and grind them and make chocolate.
Do you go so far as to wrap it then in the foil and then the branded wrapper, the Hershey's or whatever?
No,
you don't do that.
We don't do Hershey's.
Okay,
yeah,
well, I suppose you're doing the natural part.
Our very personal, our own brand, It's, Oberlin chocolate. Well, raw chocolate.
In case nobody told you what you missed in January here this year, it was just cold. I'm not sure you missed anything else except that it was just cold. You came back, and I think probably it was still cold at that point.
It was.
In fact, it might have been cold until just a couple of days ago. But in January, really, I think that's all you missed. Yeah. No matter where in Ohio you were, it was just cold. The weather must have been nice. I don't know about the rest of your living conditions down there, but the
weather was nice. Yeah, we went swimming almost every day, and wore short sleeve shirts, and we kept in touch, and we really had a lot of sympathy for you guys here in Oberlin.
No, you didn't. I'm not buying that.
Yeah, we would sort of, let's get a weather report so we can sit around and talk
laugh about
how cold it is there.
Right. Yeah. Well, we've got about 10 minutes left. This is WOBC Oberlin 91.5 FM, Oberlin College and Community Radio. My guest is John Gates, who at one point was my second grade teacher and most recently is my next door neighbor. Two things that I wanted to try and ask you about. One is your involvement with the farmers market here in town.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
I think I see your truck backing out every Saturday at about 9:30 to head down to the library parking lot there. You're active in that? What's your role?
Very active, and that again is a result of my involvement in SEPA, this project that works in Guatemala to improve education in rural communities, in rural Mayan communities. So we have we sell bread, two or three kinds of cookies. We sell plants at the beginning of the year. We open May 3rd. It's the same day as the big parade.
Oh,
and there are probably 12, 15, maybe 15 other vendors there in the area between the Oberlin Library, Public Library, and the police station. It's a great place because, people can pull in there and park close and shop. And then, and then we sell Guatemalan textiles and coffee. And
the money goes back somehow to the residents there?
The money goes back to Guatemala in the form of scholarships. The community of Santa Elena, it's a community of about 450 people. And this past year, as an example, we provided the money for 29 scholarships so that the students could continue their education beyond sixth grade in middle school and high school. So actually, let's see, and the figure was, there were 29 students, and how much money did that represent? Oh my gosh. Oh, wow. I'm drawing a blank on it. Maybe it'll come back to me in just a little bit.
Sure.
But, it was Over $12,000 that we provided, and one of the ways we earn that money is through the farmers market,
right?
Selling all kinds of good things, good, tasty, homemade things.
Now, is the summer market different from the winter market in terms of your involvement?
It is. I'm not very involved in the winter market
because you're in Guatemala, right?
I'm in Guatemala during the month of January, and then when I come back, I'm really need a rest for a couple of weeks, and but Bill Fuchsman, he's the treasurer of SEPA, and his wife Barbara, and Megan Schiff, who's another member of SEPA. They work the market there from January, February, March, April, and keep it going. And Megan coordinates the volunteer program, and we always appreciate volunteers that would like to work at selling stuff and earning money for.
Is there a way for them, people who might want to volunteer, to get in touch with you? Or whoever they would need to talk to? Yeah,
actually, they probably would have to come to the market and pick up one of our flyers, and then they would have a phone number. Actually, they could. I could give you my number.
Well, if you want to share it, and if not, that's fine too.
My number's 440-774-5484. 440-774-5484. They could call me if people wanted to volunteer for that, and I'm sure we could find a place for them. But that's one of the more important ways that we earn money for our educational program in Guatemala.
Okay. Well, I'll take my cue up for the end of my show based on when the next DJ comes in. But the last question that I might have asked you about would be the trip to South Dakota that we went on.
Yes.
And it seems to fall, as you're talking about these different outreach programs, it seems to fall in that same vein.
Yep.
How long had First Church been doing those? I should say, by way of background, that I think it was 1988, the summer that I went out there.
Right.
We drove a motor home.
Yep.
I say we, I had no part of driving it. That was Chris Andrews who did some of that, and yourself, and Chris Peterson, too, actually, was on that trip.
Yeah.
So what was the involvement with the Sioux tribe out there in South Dakota with the church here?
Well, First Church organized summer trips out there for I don't know how many years, probably 12 years, maybe more, I don't know, but every summer they would organize a trip and it was a 3-week trip. And we make some money and get ready to go, and we were actually preparing a summer camp for children on the one of the reservations out there. What's the name?
The name escaped me a while ago, I'm sure, but I do remember the cistern having to sanitize that by the addition of bleach into the water supply.
That's right, and we got our water from Lake Oahe, and we got the water and put bleach in it to
right. Doesn't take a lot of bleach. You might think it should, but and then you might really hope that it wouldn't, because boy, that would taste not great. But
one of the things I remember is there was one night you had to go on an overnight camping trip, and you and I and Damien went over to some island.
I burnt popcorn that night. I don't know if that's where you were going, but we didn't have the cooking oil you might have thought you needed to pop popcorn, and I thought, water would make some steam. Let's just experiment. That was a failed experiment, people. Just let me tell you. And if nobody does anything but use a microwave to make popcorn anymore, that's fine. That works. But I grew up also knowing how to put a little layer of oil in the bottom of a pot and heat that before you put the corn kernels in, that you can still buy in a bag without needing to put it in a microwave, but it doesn't pop with water. Just let me tell you from firsthand experience. That was there were some harrowing moments on that trip. I think Damien might have had an incident with an axe, if I'm not mistaken.
He had a bad cut, and we went off to the nearest town. Wow.
Which was not close.
I don't know if that was Eagle Butte or but we did find a doctor, luckily enough, and Damien got got fixed up.
He was treated. He was fine. Absolutely.
Yeah, he was a trooper. He was good.
And so that was 88. Do you know how many years after or before was that trip, in the middle or towards the end, or?
Well, that trip was towards the end of my career in Oberlin, and I left in 90. And but I will tell you this: that had it not been for my experience in South Dakota, I don't think I'd ever thought about going to Guatemala. But I thought, man, that was pretty rustic in South Dakota, and if I could do that, and I can I'll probably be okay in Guatemala, and that did prove the case.
Well, absolutely, and it was an experience for all of us. I would say the whole process: painting fences, cleaning out cabins, sleeping outside.
Yep.
There was some animal that I'm not sure I've seen before or since that was outside the motorhome one night at the camp.
Mm-hmm.
That's the end of that story. But definitely it was a trip worth taking, and you guys, as the people who put it together, did a real good job, and it was well worth the time. I don't remember if it was a week or a month, but it was
3 weeks, about 3 weeks.
3 weeks, yeah. Okay. Yeah. And we have people coming in. Are you the next round of DJs? Fantastic. I didn't recognize any of you as the usual ones, so hello to all of you. John, I thank you very much for
You're welcome,
coming
Pete.
in.
This was a pleasure.
We may, as we had half an hour, maybe we'll have to work in another half an hour sometime, because I'm
Sorry,
sure
I'll be on time next.
That's all right. It was a good exercise in free flowing what will come next to my mind, and every so often you need to do that just to clear out all the cobwebs. So there you go. But Thank you very much for coming in. This is WOBC 91.5 Oberlin College and Community Radio. My name is Peter Cummings, and this has been Oberlin, my way of finding out what's going on in town, who all these crazy people are, and sharing that with you. Oh, we have a phone call. I wonder if that's for me. I'll pick it up. WOBC? No, you got the wrong number. It is, but hold on just a second. All right, folks, I'm handing it off. We'll see you next week.